It's time for us to bring you Focus Africa, and this time our focus is on Kenya. The country is reeling from one of the deadliest waves of anti-government protests in recent years. What started as peaceful demonstrations against controversial tax hikes and unpopular economic policies quickly spiraled into violence, leaving at least 16 people dead and over 400 injured, and thousands of businesses looted or destroyed. In Nairobi, other cities, protesters clashed with police who have been accused of using excessive force, including live ammunition, images of burning streets, tear gas, and bloodied citizens have sparked outrage both inside Kenya and across the region. At the heart of the protests is widespread frustration with President William Ruto's administration and what many see as a growing economic burden on ordinary Kenyans.
So how did it get this bad? And what's next for Kenya? Well, joining us for that insight and analysis are Emmanuel Too, journalist with Citizen TV Kenya, and Mwanase Ahmed, a prominent human rights activist in Kenya. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, lady, for joining us. Emmanuel, I know it's supposed to be ladies first, but I'm going to start with Emmanuel. Thank you very much for joining. Let's start with what you're seeing on the ground here. What's the current situation in Nairobi and other affected cities with the youth out on the streets and the protests?
Thank you very much for having me on the show. But I wanted to start with just updating you with the latest numbers. You said that there were 16 people who've been killed, but the latest numbers that we have from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights is that it is 19. The number has risen to 19, the people who were shot and killed on June 25th, which was on Wednesday this week. And of course, over 500 people injured. The police say 400 people were injured, and out of the 400, 300 are police officers. And it's really raised so many questions because many people are doubting the numbers from the police, because if you look at the numbers of the people on the streets compared to the police, then the numbers may not really add up, that it is 400 out of 300 out of 400 who are the police who are injured. But of course, it was an agitation, a call to have justice for over 60 people who were killed during last year's Gen Z demonstrations on the 25th of June 2024. But the call to have justice for 60 people who were killed led to the death of another 19. And of course, we're making several steps ahead and so many others backwards. And the height of it was the shutdown of the media, the live streaming of it. And I hope we'll get into it, that the media was told to not live stream. And the cabinet secretary in charge of Interior and National Administration said that the media was mobilizing these people to come out. But it looked very organic. The media was just playing its role to paint the picture as it is. There's a lot of vandalism. The government, the president, President William Ruto, who is under pressure, says that this was an attempt to overthrow the government and an economic sabotage in a plan to ban the country. So we're still grappling with it. We're still picking up the pieces from about 3 days ago, but we'll be monitoring the situation. Back to you.
Now, Emmanuel, based on that thing you just said, the last comment you made regarding the president's comments about it being a means or an opportunity to overthrow the government, are there any bodies that are backing this movement? Any specific groups of people that it might be said are a group of people specifically trying to overthrow the government?
Well, they are accusing the former deputy president, he's called Rigathi Gachagua, of fueling, funding, and orchestrating the chaos that we witnessed. They're saying that he's the one who is trying to use the shortcut to get to power. But the former deputy president has come out very strongly saying that if the police actually had the intelligence that he's the one who was funding and organizing the goons and those people who burnt property, stole things from the civilians, then the government should have done something, acted on that intelligence and thwart that process or the plans. But he just says that this is just the government trying to look for an escape route, trying to look for an opportunity to blame the demonstrations on someone else.
And blame it indeed. Let me come to you, Mwanase, and just really talk about, the numbers that we're seeing, numbers being injured, the casualty risen to 19. What's the government saying? What are they saying regarding just the assessment, and how is the state handling the whole situation?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I think the first thing to note is that Kenya has been an active crime scene, which is generally perpetuated by our state. The president has long suspended rule of law. We've had widespread cases of, significant corruption, state-sponsored violence, impunity, lack of accountability, kind of state capture. So Kenya is currently operating in a very, or our government is operating in a very lawless manner. So first, I think I could give you a little bit of context as to what's happened on the ground, after which then I could discuss a bit more about how the government's response and what their actions have been. 1 year ago, as mentioned, there was a mass uprising of, mothers, businesses, youth. The majority of Kenyans were frustrated and angry due to the finance bill, which was going to further tax basic commodities, essential goods, and make it and further increase the challenges of living in Kenya. The majority of Kenyans already live in high states of poverty with the inability to just live dignified lives. So while our politicians blatantly show huge amounts of wealth, 16 million shilling watches, huge homes, vehicles. So there's a huge level of inequality, and public services are basically non-existent. Education, health, infrastructure, even having water in communities for people to have hygienic access to hygiene and basic needs. So that is compromised due to extreme levels of corruption. Last year, we had 1.3 million shillings unaccounted for within our national budget, while accumulating the same in national debt, while withdrawing a lot of essential basic services. So Kenyans have been frustrated due to this blatant corruption. And last year, we had 60 people who were murdered by our state, by the police, and also by the army, as recently shown in Blood Parliament. And 1 year later, there's been not one single arrest. There's no accountability at all, complete impunity, whereas some of these murderers and their commanders and directors are very well known. So 1 year later, together with the mothers of the families whose children were murdered, siblings, family members, and Kenyans, they went to the police to actually give a notice saying, on June 25th, we would like to lay flowers. We'll be taking roses to the places on the streets where our children were murdered in their honor. And we'll also be delivering a petition to the parliament to demand for a public inquest looking into these atrocities, because we want accountability. We need justice. The police approved this notice after some back and forth and agreed to provide protection. So families and Kenyans were coming out to the streets to honor the dead, honor the murdered of last year, as well as to demand accountability. And prior to this, we've had a continued increase in extrajudicial killings. We had Albert Ojwang, who was a school teacher, abducted from his home, his parents' home in Homa Bay, and then tortured and murdered by the police, who then said he had hit his head on the wall.
Mwanase,
We have that, and we have.
right, Mwanase, because we sort of get an overview of the protests and why they're back on the street 1 year after. And of course, I always say this every single time, that Africa, or different countries in Africa, whether it's West Africa, East Africa, or South Africa, they're just sides of the same coins, and we've seen that also play out here in Nigeria. But Amnesty International and other organizations have condemned the use of this live bullets on the unarmed protesters, and that's why we see the result, the death that we saw from 1 year, and now again we're seeing that reprisal back again. But what will accountability look like? Because you said that, on the anniversary of the protests that broke out last year, the families and the mothers of the murdered protesters asked for, investigation. but most importantly, accountability. What would it look like very quickly, because we're out of time?
We have clear evidence of goons who were lighting businesses on lighting public property on fire, who were destroying and looting businesses in CBD, who came out to the streets armed and violent, being protected by the police. And there's been no arrest. So we have a lot of state-sponsored violence, which has also integrated sexual violence. Last week, we were threatened with sexual violence against women, saying that they wanted to stab women to create fear. We had gang rapes happening on the streets. We had police watching and looting with goons all of these businesses. We had police watching people light other places on fire, light police stations on fire. We had goons who are armed with knives and machetes being protected by the police. Accountability would look like arrests. It would look like arrests of those goons, their directors, those who are funding them, and them being brought charges for those crimes. Accountability would look like a public inquest looking into all of the murders and deaths from last year, the enforced disappearances, the torture. Accountability would, how our government is responding. Our CS Interior actually gave a shoot to kill order to police, saying that if anyone comes near a police station or harasses police, that the police are being directed by government to shoot to kill. That is not accountability, that is not rule of law, and further saying that the police will be protected by legal teams. So we have people who are who are missing, who are in morgues, who have been raped, who have had bullets in them, who have been murdered, and our state's response has been a shoot to kill order.
Okay.
And also trumped up charges against human rights defenders, trying to charge human rights defenders that are well known with the crimes, large-scale crimes that the government is actually sponsoring and conducting for the looting and destruction.
Apologies, we've only got a few minutes to go. Wanted to get one question in for Mr. Too here. Now, you're a journalist, and the authorities enforced the shutdown of all live streaming coverage of the protest. What message did this send to the rest of Kenyans, especially the youths, the agitated ones who are on the course to try and see things change?
Well, first of all, I think that directive has been really gone against, because many media houses are saying that this is an affront against the freedom of the media, which is articulated in the Constitution of Kenya, Articles 34 and 35, which is the media freedom, and of course access to information. And the youth have actually gone ahead and said that they're going to continue to form another media, which is social media, to put this across. But really, it has been a very unfortunate situation, because the government says that the media is being used to mobilize these protesters to come to the streets. But it's really been a big problem. It is the first time we are seeing this in a very long time, where the government is shutting down live streaming of media and even revoking some of the licenses temporarily before the media houses could get the orders from the court to get their licenses back. And it is a really big clawback on the steps that had been made in terms of the media freedom. And the youth are saying that despite that, the calls for justice will continue. They were calling for justice for over 60 people who were killed. None of them has been, no case has been closed yet.
Okay, then.
And of course, we are having another close to 20 who are yet to be accounted for.
All right, now, so Emmanuel, regarding the media being shut down, or at least, well, they have gone against that order, there is social media. There is the youth who use these social medias to be able to get their expressions out there. However, are there a group that actually can discuss with the government? Because in past situations with the Kenyan instances, we've seen that there are no groups that the government can actually talk to as a tangible representative of the people's feelings, the people's reactions. Is there a formula? Is there a group of people that the government is negotiating with regarding these situations in Kenya?
Well, right now the government is really grappling with that because the new formation, the youthful team that is out there, the Gen Zs, are saying that they are leaderless, they are tribeless, they're not associated or affiliated to any political party, and it is a big headache for the government because they are unable to get to them. But there are some meetings that the president had started last year when the same uprising had started, and the president was going out in town halls, going to universities where we have many youth there. He's also been going to major towns to try and talk to the youth. He has not yet started that, but we hope that they will start that very soon to try and fight off the fire that is coming out of the Gen Z demonstrations and the youth that are demanding for accountability. But so far, I don't think there's any person they can really talk to, unlike the way it was before, where the opposition leader Raila Odinga used to actually be called on the table to try and discuss the way forward and have some of the national dialogues go on. We've had 2 or 3 or more, which have actually ended up not producing so much, but the call for the dialogue put an end to the demonstrations that we witnessed some years back. But right now, it is really a big problem for the government, because they don't have someone to go to and try to talk to them to stop the demonstrations.
All right.